Welcome back to the UA Piping Industry College. We are in the Cross-Connections Control Lab for backflow testing. First, we will inform the customer that we will be turning the water off during the test. Next, we will identify the backflow preventer. Today, we will be testing the pressure vacuum breaker. We will inspect the backflow preventer for any visible leaks. Make sure it is flowing in the right direction. Ensure there are no cross connections downstream. And identify the components of the pressure vacuum breaker. We have 2 shutoff valves, 2 properly located test cocks, 1 check valve, and 1 air inlet valve. Also observe that there are acceptable clearances around the assembly. To set up for test 1, remove air inlet and inspect air inlet valve. Flush test cocks, starting with test cock number 1, followed by test cock number 2. Today, we will be testing using the TK99E differential gauge with a 5-valve configuration. We have a high side control valve, a low side control valve, and a bypass control valve. On the back, we have a high side bleed valve and a low side bleed valve. You will want to remove any unused hoses. Remove the low pressure hose and the bypass hose. Make sure all control and bleed valves are closed before the test. Connect the high pressure hose to test cock number 2. And open test cock number 2. Open high side bleed valve to bleed out any air. Close the high side bleed valve once all the air is purged. Close shutoff valve number 2, shutoff valve number 1. Hold the differential pressure gauge at the same elevation as the air inlet valve. For test 1, we are going to determine the air inlet opening point. It must open at 1 psid or greater. First, we are going to open the high side bleed valve slowly. Observe and record the air inlet valve opening point. Drain the water from the body of the pressure vacuum breaker. Confirm the air inlet valve open fully and record. Close high side bleed valve. Close test cock number 2 and remove the hose. setup for test number 2. Open shutoff valve 1 only. Connect high pressure hose to test cock number 1. Open test cock number 1 and bleed out any air by opening the high side bleed valve and close the high side bleed valve when the air is purged. Hold differential gauge at test cock 2. Test 2 is to see that the check valve is closed tight in the forward direction of flow of 1 psid or greater. Close shutoff 1. Open test cock number 2 to relieve pressure downstream of the check valve. Wait for gauge to stabilize and water has stopped flowing from test cock number 2. Observe and record the pressure drop across the check valve. Close test cocks and remove equipment. Open shut-off valve number 1. Simply connect gauge to test cock number 1. Open test cock number 1. Observe and record the static line pressure. Close test cock number 1 and remove the gauge. Notify the customer that we will be turning the water back on. Wipe down the assembly and check for leaks. Make sure the canopy is reinstalled. Open shutoff valve number 2. This completes the testing for pressure vacuum breaker. Thank you.